The Ukrainian Air Force has identified and struck the headquarters and ammunition depot of the occupying Russian army near the border with Russia's Belgorod region. The strike, carried out using Western-made air bombs known for their high precision, resulted in the destruction of the building and hangar, as well as the elimination of soldiers and equipment located there. Additionally, aerial reconnaissance units from the Cherny Roy division of the Ukrainian armed forces targeted the positions and artillery installations of Russian troops in a forested area near the border. The positions and occupying forces were destroyed by munitions dropped from drones, and the artillery systems were also rendered inoperable.
The occupation forces of the aggressor country Russia are strengthening their defense on the Kinburn and Tender Spits due to fear of the Ukrainian armed forces landing. This was reported on air by the representative of the OK Yug, Vladislav Voloshin, on Ranok.live. According to him, the enemy still has a large group concentrated in the south, and the command periodically carries out rotations. For example, Russian paratroopers were recently deployed on the Tenderovskaya Spit instead of the Don Assault Brigade. Russia has strengthened the artillery units on these spits, placed anti-tank weapons there to counteract landings, to hit our boats and our equipment as they approach. Russia is very afraid that we will seize these bridgeheads, so it is increasing the number of troops there, the military man noted. At the same time, the enemy is not wasting time and is strengthening its positions along the entire left bank of the Dnieper. Similar actions are observed in the area of the settlements of Oleshki and Golaya Pristan. Earlier, the representative of the Southern Defense Forces, Vladislav Voloshin, reported that the occupiers were not only strengthening their defenses, but were also sending trained saboteurs closer to Ukrainian positions to further capture them. According to his information, on July the 25th, a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group tried to break into the settlement of Stepnogorsk. According to him, this is the new tactic the enemy is currently using to capture Ukrainian armed forces positions. This is an infiltration tactic, when a sabotage group secretly, undercover, tries to enter some populated area that has not yet been destroyed by their weapons, to gain a foothold there, to sit down, to take control of the logistics routes and thus hold on to this populated area, the military man said. This is how the enemy tried to gain a foothold in the south of Stepnogorsk, where there are apartment buildings and private sector, surviving basements and the like. That is, as Voloshin specified, there is a place to hide. He said that such operations are carried out by representatives of Russian special forces who have fairly high training. Weapons, equipment, for example, thermal imaging cloaks. Ukrainian forces are sending in reserves to the Pokrovsk front to hold off the Russian advance. Lieutenant Colonel Serhiy Tsekotsky, an officer with the Ukrainian Armed Forces, shared the information on Espresso TV. The enemy is highly active in the Pokrovsk direction. The Russians are trying to seize as much territory as possible before the weather shifts. It's clear in everything they do. Right now, most enemy assaults and breakthroughs are happening here. A third of all daily clashes are in the Pokrovsk area. As usual, they rely on infantry assaults, constantly pushing in small groups, Tsekotsky said. He said Russian forces are clearly trying to encircle Pokrovsk, and the Ukrainian command is working to block those efforts. Their main goal is to cut off the road to Dobropilya and take Pokrovsk. We understand that. The Ukrainian Defense Forces Command is doing everything to stop them. Additional Ukrainian units are now being deployed to hold the line near Pokrovsk. He added, at present, the Russian army is being squeezed on the Pokrovsk front. But AFU officer, political scientist Andriy Kachuk says that the situation in the Pokrovsk direction is critical. The Russian forces want to capture the city by the end of the year. The situation is not difficult. The situation is critical. The enemy is really taking the city in a half pincer. That is, from the south he is further pressing the settlement of Udachne in order to take this half ring and try to close it. From the north, fighting is going on in the direction of Krasny Lyman in order to advance to the settlement of Pokrovsk, and the Russians have long since reached positions from which they can shell Dobropilya. In general, they are actively saturating this section of the Pokrovsk, Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka front with guided aerial bombs. There were 30 guided aerial bombs per day until recently. This is a very large number of guided aerial bombs. This is really the situation that is difficult. It is really critical on this section of the front, because the enemy wants to capture Pokrovsk by the end of the year, for which they need some kind of big victory, he said. Andriy Kachuk noted that the Russians expect to capture a dozen smaller settlements in the addition to Pokrovsk in order to spend the winter in the cities, and they are counting on this settlement as well as 9 to 11 smaller settlements in the section I mentioned in order to spend the winter in cities and not be victims of our drones in the open field, in the open territory. Accordingly, we must understand this and work more effectively, because there is a big problem there with conveying information from personnel to the top. Very often, on some sections of the front, it is recorded that they give unreliable information, which is then accompanied by the problem of interaction with the various units. Today, I know certain steps that we are taking in Pokrovsk. There are certain units that are very effective, and they are now being deployed there to correct the situation. I hope that we will be able to balance such a critical point and delay the occupation of the settlement as far as possible for the sake of complete and even greater exhaustion of the enemy, which we are inflicting on him along the entire front line. The officer of the Armed Forces of Ukraine added.